Hello, this is Harry Reasoner. A short time ago here, we marked and observed Remembrance Day. In this past Remembrance Day, November 11th, 2008, marked the 90th anniversary of the signing of the armistice, which ended the Great War, the war to end all wars, the First World War. On Remembrance Day, I do take the time to think about the incredible sacrifices of many, and I do take the time to think about the things that I'm grateful for, and inevitably, my thoughts turn to my grandfather, my father's father, who answered the call of duty and went to fight. I never knew my grandfather. He died before my parents even met. And I actually never really heard many stories about him, and I'm unlikely to hear any more, as my own father has passed away. But there are some things I do know about him. He went willingly and voluntarily to fight in the Great War. He wasn't conscripted, drafted, or coerced, at least not physically. He went willingly. And I can only assume that the reason he went was that he thought the cause was just, that he thought that it was right, and that it was correct. To go and fight for God and country, to kill, possibly be killed. He felt that strongly about it. If the stories connecting me to my grandfather are few and far between, well, the tangible, physical objects that I can look at and touch that would connect me to him are rare still. But there are a couple of them, and occasionally I take them out and look at them and think about things. And the first is a helmet like this one, which he returned from the war with. And I take it out and I look at it occasionally, and I think about him and I think about things. There are many who would suggest that he was a hero for doing what he did, and I'm not going to argue with that. But the more I think about it, the more powerfully I am drawn to the conclusion that, first and foremost, he was a victim. He was a victim of chance. He went off to fight in that war with his strong convictions, simply because of the random chance accident of his birth, and when and where it occurred. If it had taken place somewhere else, in some time else, he would have believed much differently. In my life, I have had dealings with religious fundamentalists and fanatics from a variety of colors and stripes. I have found them to be bigoted, divisive, intolerant, prejudiced, homophobic, misogynist, etc., etc., to varying degrees. But the one thing that they all have in common is that they are absolutely convinced that they're right. And they would look down their noses at anyone who would ever suggest that chance or random occurrences would have any influence on the creation of life on this planet or any changes that it may have undergone in its history. And I have found that fascinating for at least two reasons. The first is that the fundamentalist religious person's viewpoint or opinion of chance when it comes to evolutionary theory, let's say, is rife with misunderstanding and gross exaggeration. But secondly, and more to the main point of this video, is profoundly and tragically ironic. It was random chance that determined their religious beliefs. Surely no fundamentalist would be silly enough to suggest that just by some happy coincidence, Christian babies are born in Christian countries, or that by some divine fluke astronomically unlikely fluke. Muslim children find themselves in Muslim societies. Perhaps, Nephilimfree, it's not coincidental at all. And perhaps, if the circumstances of your birth were somewhat different, you would be tossing grenades around somewhere in the hopes of pleasing Allah. Nephilim, you see, my grandfather did indeed return home from the Great War, carrying a helmet with him like the one I showed you a picture of earlier. But he also came home carrying a helmet like this one. And sir, can you tell me, which one of these helmets did my grandfather bring home, because it had been the one that he was issued with by his society to go and kill or be killed in, and which one did he just bring home as a souvenir of his experiences at the front? Well, you can't tell. With no certainty can you tell me which one it was. And if you had to ask a question to help you figure it out, the question you would ask is, of course, well, where was my grandfather born? And I would answer that with this: does it really matter? There are only two things that we can say for sure here. And the first is that regardless of which helmet it was that he wore it with pride and with the certain knowledge that he was right to do so. And the only other thing we can say for sure, regardless of which helmet he placed on his head, he wasn't born wearing either of them.